if you use the same tools that you used to use before, then you just get blinded by the sheer volume of the regulatory controls, and you're not necessarily seeing the right things that you're supposed to see.
"2023 will be remembered for the term governance." Even more exciting, therefore, to be joined today, this afternoon, by the CEO of governance.com, Bert Boerman. Bert, good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
How are you doing?
Very good.
Now, of course, the asset management industry has been dealing with governance for years, and there have also been some sort of tech solutions. But to be honest, I thought Excel could deal with all of this, can't it?
Of course it can. I mean, if you want to run a fund business by Excel, I mean, you take a spreadsheet, you create 25 subsheets, you do one for investors, net asset values, controls, documents, you create a bunch of VLOOKUPs, maybe some conditional formatting to make it look nice, and then you rely on the fact that everybody remembers the procedures and knows what to do and when to do it. And so it's very cheap and very quick to implement and very flexible, so happy days.
So people should do that, shouldn't they?
No, they shouldn't.
Why not?
You can already assume what the problems are with this kind of spreadsheet solutions, which is, you know, all jokes aside, is alarmingly closer to the reality than we would like to be. So the problem is that if you want to look at data quality, data duplication, audit trail, you need to, in this business, you need to prove what you have done and that you have done the right things. And that is not possible if you manage this business by Excel. So you need different tool set for that.
And do you still come across some funds that are actually using Excel?
Yeah, I'm not going to say exactly how many, but it's a very, very significant part of the industry.
Amazing. Right, let's just talk about, though, from a regulatory perspective. People describe it as a wave of regulation coming across the whole fund sector. Is this actually achieving its goal of investor protection from your perspective?
To be brutally honestly, I don't think so. And it does, I mean, regulation is the starting point, but it's the application of the regulation that is causing the problem. And I mean, it's like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. If you're sitting 10 centimeters above this puzzle on your table, you're not going to see which pieces are damaged, and you will not see that until it's much too late. So it's this sheer volume that is the problem, but we're using systems that were designed for a much simpler time. So in the past we had traditional investment funds that had much less complexity, but now you have alternative investment classes, and there's much more complexity inherent in the structure. So if you use the same tools that you used to use before, then you just get blinded by the sheer volume of the regulatory controls, and you're not necessarily seeing the right things that you're supposed to see.
I mean, is there a risk also that some European banks, I don't know, maybe go out of business because just the sheer cost of compliance makes them unprofitable?
Well, yeah, it's cost of compliance, and it's also, of course, it's the risk of frauds. I mean, we've seen plenty of cases in the past with Madoff and other structures where the controls were not performed. I think we're in a much better shape today. But indeed, I mean, the average bank today is spending over $1 billion a year on compliance. It's absolutely enormous, yes.
Now, for you as a company, I know that you yourselves have pivoted your business model a little bit and now are focusing on bigger institutional clients. How is that going?
It's going very well. It was a bit of a, you know, we used to be a startup, and then you get into a scale-up land at a certain moment, and you also need to see where do you provide the most added value. And what we found is that we function very well in a very complex organization that has a lot of barriers, a lot of different systems that need to be connected. And we found that the approach of our low-code platform, together with the expertise that our team brings to the table, we found that it is actually helping the big financial institutions most. Because if you look at smaller companies, there are plenty of other more off-the-shelf solutions on the market today. But large institutions, they cannot adapt their operational processes 100% just to fit the software. The technology should always be working for the business and not the other way around. And so our approach is to say it needs to be adaptable enough for large institutions, but always with a security first approach, because you can never have any kind of breach of data or security issues, of course.
Now, I understand that you've been in business about 10 years, something like that, and you are now going through a bit of evolution yourself from startup to scale up. From your perspective, How well does the Luxembourg ecosystem look after scale-ups?
Well, it's not just a Luxembourg ecosystem, I think it's international ecosystems. There's a lot of excitement about startups, and it's important to have this excitement. And especially in Luxembourg, that excitement is fanned by the government, directly from the top, by institutions, by Luxembourg House of Financial Technology, about other ecosystems as well. It's very important to fan that excitement, because excitement about startup drives change. And there's change is the new the new given, so the things are changing all the time. So it's good to have startups, but at a certain moment you need to realize also that startups become bigger companies, and creating a startup is hard. Any business, it's not just a technology business, any company that you start is hard, but scaling a company is infinitely harder, because I mean, in the beginning, when you have startup nowadays, you have a lot of support. You have grants, you have subsidies, you have ecosystems that support these companies, and that's great because it helps you cross this famous valley of the death, to help you survive the first years and to get your first client on board and prove that you have a place and that you have a product that works. But then you start growing, and then all of a sudden all the challenges, they change, because now you need to do things at scale. Whereas as a startup you could improvise around everything, now you need to have structure, you need to hire people, and all of a sudden the costs go up dramatically, the complexity of your own organization goes up dramatically, so you have a new set of challenges. And then you get into the point where the startup ecosystem doesn't work for you anymore, because you kind of outgrown the startup support, but you're still too small for venture capitalists. And
I was going to say, can't you just call a friendly VC and ask for several million?
Yeah, you could, yeah, and we tried to do that in the past way too early, and we found out that there's a time to do it and there's time not to do it. And when you don't meet the minimum hurdles of VCs, then they just cannot invest, because they can only place so many bets a year, and they're looking usually for companies that are already past certain revenue thresholds, for example, or a certain number of clients that you have onboarded. If you don't meet that, then they will be interested, but you're not going to land a check.
So in actual fact, what you're saying is right now it's about you generating enough revenue so that you can organically grow.
Yes, yeah. So of course, getting funding from investors is not the only way to grow. You can grow organically as well. Growth does take funding. And so you always have to balance about how fast do you want to grow to how profitable or unprofitable do you allow yourself to be. So that is something to keep in mind.
But if we were having this conversation, let's say in 10 years' time, you're here now, where do you think you might be?
Well, next part of where we want to go is international expansion. We are already serving clients in over 80 countries around the world, but our offices are here in Europe. Next step would be to start looking also to have a more permanent establishment in other locations as well.
And that was Bert Boerman, CEO of Governance.com. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.